Yo guys, what's up? We finally made it to the CSS section for these jump jet videos. I'm Jake, and I'm taking you through like 100 questions on questions you might get when you're going for a front-end developer or web dev interview. So let's jump into this one. We finally made it. I can't believe it. This question's pretty simple. I guess if you've had any experience with HTML or CSS, you probably know this one, but we're just going to go through step by step anyway. So this one is, what is the difference between classes and IDs in CSS? So I put together a stunningly stylized page with an unordered list and some list items here. First of all, I also put together some CSS, and we have an ID, a class, and then an element selector. At the moment, the HTML doesn't have any classes or any IDs on it. So the only styles being applied are those being applied to the body. That's just general. And it's cascading. That's the C in CSS. So that means that style is being applied to everything within the body unless it's been overruled. So you'll see here I've got a font size of 7 relative M's, and that's why the letters are so big. I'm using CodePen, by the way, which is pretty cool if you want to just play around with stuff. Okay, so down here we have our element selector, and that's making the font red. So any list item on this page is colored red. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to give these guys a class like this. No, not like that. Class of, let's say, green. Okay, so now all of the list items have a class. This is one of the first differences between IDs and classes. A class can be applied to multiple elements. An ID can only be applied to one. So you'll see here I have 5 list items, and I've given all of them the class of green. Now, another thing to notice with the class, if you don't already know this, we use a dot before the class name in the CSS. So down here I've got dot green, and then up here in the HTML I've said class equals green. So that's one thing that you already know about CSS and the class selector. It can be applied upon multiple elements. 5 list items, 5 classes, now they're all green. So they're taking on this color here. So then it's the next question is, what's the difference between a class and ID? So IDs can be applied on one element. Let's apply it to this one here. So ID equals orange. So when that's applied, you see here, I have a single list item, and I've applied that ID. So now the ID is adding this star rule to that list item and that one only. Let's try to put an ID onto another one. Try and put the same ID, orange. Okay, so now I've targeted in two places. Now you're gonna say, Jake, why is it still working? Why can I use 2 IDs? I thought you said you can't do that. Okay, HTML and CSS is pretty forgiving. And sometimes it will allow you to do things that are technically illegal. And that is one of those cases. So ignore this in the sense that some things might work, but you're not supposed to do it. And when you start, for example, using jQuery to try to target a selector using an ID, and you've broken this rule, or someone else has added a library, and you've got IDs all over the place, all the same IDs, you're going to run into issues. So yes, technically it will work, but no, don't do it. IDs are only supposed to be applied to a single element. One ID for one element. Classes for everyone. So I kind of like to think about a class almost as though, like we're saying, these are people. So that class of people applies to everyone in a crowd, for example. But the ID is that person's name. It's not like everyone is called like my name, Jacob Edward Dawson. That's not the case. There's one ID for me, even though we're all people. So here we have the class for everyone and then the ID for the specific element. So when you're asked the question, what's the difference between classes and IDs? That's one thing to say. A class is for multiple elements, and ID is for a single element. But that's not actually all. There is something that's also very important to understand. Within cascading style sheets, the word cascade is to describe the fact that the styles are kind of ranked and they fall downwards. So normally what you have, they call it like the order of precedence or specificity. So normally where you place a rule within the style sheet will change how the rules applied. But a difference between classes and IDs is that they have different levels of specificity. I cannot say that word. So ID has a higher specificity than classes. And that's because it's more targeted. So you'll see here, normally if I have one rule above another, the one that's lower in the page will have higher precedence. So let's go here. I'm going to put another class on here, and let's just call this one red. So I'm going to give these guys a class. So a class should have like equal specificity. I'm not even going to say it anymore. They should be equal in terms of the order of precedence. So let's say this one here, the class of red, we'll give that a color of red. Now all of a sudden, they've all become red. Now you say, okay, well we have two classes. They seem to be equally applied. They should be exactly even. That's where the cascading rules come into play. The class or the rule that is lower down on the page will normally have a higher precedence. So let's put the red now at the top and the green below it. So the green is lower down in the page. It has a higher specificity. So that's the rule that's applied. And when it comes to classes versus IDs, they also have that different rule. So even though I have the ID higher up than the class, the ID style is being applied because it comes like, it has more power when it comes to deciding what the rule is. There are of course various other ones, like you can have things like, if I do important, which you should never really do, but if I add something like important to it, then I can overrule the ID. But for most cases, you don't want to use the important rule. So if you want to target something, you'll use like an ID. And then of course, we'll go into this later, but you can be more specific. So if I go like an LI with green, let's see, LI with green dot red. No, still not going to apply above the ID. Let's put this down there. Yeah, so those are the two major things. Then IDs apply to one element, classes apply to multiple elements, and then an ID has a higher level of specificity than a class. There are some other slight differences between the two, but essentially if you're asked the question, what's the difference between classes and IDs? Like the other thing you can say is that, of course, they have a different like selector syntax. So with the ID, use the hash. Some of you people might call it the bang, hash bang. And with the class, we have the dot or the full stop. Yeah, so that is that's the difference between classes and IDs. And if you get asked that in a front-end developer interview, really you should know that already. And I'm guessing that 99% of you already do, but that's just a little refresher. And we finally made it to the CSS section of the front-end developer questions. If you like these videos, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the feedback and likes and comments. I appreciate it. And good luck with your interviews, guys and girls. Bye.